AdBlue. It was sold to us as a way to reduce exhaust emissions in vehicles and equipment. But now, alarm bells are ringing. Both the road transport and the heavy lifting sectors have experienced issues that have been attributed to the use of AdBlue. And now a major association is highlighting potential safety risks arising from engine power loss or shutdowns caused by DEF system malfunctions. So join us as we take a deep dive into the issue.
AdBlue. Yeah, AdBlue. We're diving into why this is shaking up the heavy transport and lifting world today.
It's wild, isn't it? How something so small can cause such massive headaches.
Totally. So picture this. You're at the gas station, you've got your windshield washer fluid, and right next to it, AdBlue. This stuff, it's a diesel exhaust fluid meant to cut down those harmful emissions from diesel engines.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about any emissions here. We're talking about nitrogen oxides, nasty stuff. Smog, acid rain, even breathing problems. These things contribute to it all. AdBlue oxides into harmless nitrogen and water vapor.
Sounds like a pretty good solution.
It does. But like a lot of things that seem simple on paper, well, reality has a way of throwing curveballs.
And that's where ESTA comes in, right?
Exactly.
The European Association for Abnormal Road Transport and Mobile Crane Rental. They did some digging, some pretty interesting research, and what they found is kind of alarming.
Yeah, this isn't just a one-off thing either.
55 companies across 10 countries? That's a pretty decent sample size.
Exactly. And the results, this AdBlue problem, it's widespread.
And it gets worse.
The big one, the one that really makes you stop and think, is the safety aspect. We're talking potential engine failure, and not just when the vehicle's parked, but while it's in operation.
Yeah, and in an industry where precision is key, think heavy lifting, transport, that's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. One wrong move, and it could be disastrous.
And we're not just talking hypotheticals here. ESTA's reports, they lay out some pretty scary situations. Cranes malfunctioning mid-lift, trucks breaking down on the open road.
Even disruptions to critical operations, wind turbine installations, stuff like that.
Talk about a major setback.
Yeah, and get this, for some companies, a third of their on-road breakdowns are linked to AdBlue.
A third. Wow, that's huge.
It's a significant number. And it's not just a recent thing either. We're talking over 20 AdBlue-related incidents in the past 2 years. For some companies, that's according to the reports. 20 incidents in 2 years. This isn't something we could just ignore.
20 in 2 years, that's a lot. This is way bigger than most people realize.
Way bigger. And it's high time we addressed it.
So we've got potential danger, major delays, and it all comes back to this AdBlue system. But how does something designed to be good for the environment, reduce emissions, how does it end up causing so many problems?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be fair, AdBlue itself isn't necessarily bad for the environment. It's more about, I guess, how the whole system is set up and some of the challenges that come with it.
Okay, so let's break this down a little. What's actually going wrong with the AdBlue system? What's the deal?
Well, a big culprit, a major one, is crystallization. Basically, when the temperature drops, AdBlue can crystallize, and those crystals, they can clog up the system, especially the pump and those lines that carry the fluid.
Right, so it's like, what happens when you put too much sugar in your coffee? It's fine at first, but then it gets cold and bam, sugar crystals everywhere.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. And those crystals, just like in your coffee, they can really mess things up.
So it's not like the technology itself is faulty necessarily. It's the AdBlue that can actually become a problem.
That's right. And this isn't just us guessing here. Companies like WINS, they're big in the vehicle chemicals world. They know this issue inside and out. They've been talking about this crystallization problem for a while now, even offer additives that are supposed to, reduce the risk of those crystals forming.
So there are ways to prevent it.
Yeah, to a certain degree. Tuffa Tanks, they're a UK tank manufacturer. They suggest a few things like make sure you're getting your AdBlue from a good source, a reputable supplier, and storing it properly, keeping it in a temperature-controlled place if you can.
Temperature control, okay, makes sense.
Oh, and keeping the vehicle's AdBlue tank topped up, that helps too. Kind of acts like a buffer against those really extreme temperatures.
Right, so it seems like a lot falls on the users to get this right. What about the manufacturers? What are they doing to address these safety concerns?
Well, ESTA's been pretty vocal about it. They're really pushing engine manufacturers to step up. One of their big suggestions, a key one, is to build in an override function.
An override. So, like, if there's a malfunction, you could temporarily bypass the AdBlue system.
Exactly. It would give operators, a little breathing room. Instead of sudden engine failure, they'd have a chance to bring the vehicle to a stop safely. Think about it, you're halfway through lifting a huge steel beam, and suddenly, no power. Not good.
No, not good at all. That would be terrifying. So are manufacturers on board with this override idea?
Well, that's where things get a bit complicated. The industry, especially now, they're laser focused on electrification, developing electric powertrains for the future. And those obviously don't use AdBlue at all.
So basically, investing in a major redesign of these diesel engines, even for safety reasons, it might not be their top priority. Like, they're trying to move away from diesel completely.
Yeah, you got it. It's a tough spot to be in, for sure.
It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need to fix these safety issues now, but they're also thinking, is this even going to be a problem in 5 years?
It's true. It's like AdBlue. It was supposed to be the answer, right? Reduce emissions, meet those stricter standards. And it does, to be fair. But it's also created a whole new set of problems.
And let's not forget about those EU transport regulations. We're talking serious red tape here. There's that whole weights and dimensions directive, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Basically, it sets limits on, like, how big and heavy trucks and loads can be, for safety reasons, to protect the roads and bridges, all that.
Right, makes sense.
And ESTA, they've actually been pushing for some changes to that directive, trying to make it more consistent across Europe. They want clearer guidelines, especially when it comes to permits for those oversized or really heavy loads, especially for stuff that crosses borders.
So they're trying to think ahead, especially with all this new technology popping up. It sounds like a lot to juggle. But how does this all tie back to the AdBlue issue?
Well, on the one hand, you've got ESTA saying, hey, we need to make this AdBlue system safer right now, like with that override function we talked about. But they're also looking at the bigger picture, alternative fuels, electric powertrains, all of that. It all factors into how they're approaching these problems.
So for our listeners who are trying to keep up with all of this, what are the key takeaways from this whole AdBlue situation?
I think the biggest one, honestly, is just awareness. AdBlue is causing real problems right now, and those problems can be dangerous. And it's not just about whether or not you drive a truck. We all rely on these industries to work, to get things done safely.
Especially now with all these large-scale projects popping up, wind farms, new infrastructure, you name it. These things rely on heavy transport, heavy lifting. So any kind of disruption, it impacts all of us.
For sure. And the second takeaway, stay informed. This whole industry is changing so fast, new technologies, new rules. It's a lot to keep up with.
So much change all the time. Well, on that note, here's a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Will this big push for electric vehicles, will that eventually make AdBlue a thing of the past? Or will we still be dealing with these same problems as we try to make heavy transport greener?
Yeah, it's a good question. Only time will tell, I guess.
That's for sure. We'll have to revisit this down the road and see where things stand. Thanks for diving into this with us today. This AdBlue situation, it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Until next time.